Okay, so if we can just have some introductions from Sarah and Sophie.
Sarah Greedy, Innovation Director for Nickelmash. Nickelmash is the fourth biggest brake manufacturer in the UK. We have 5 sites across the UK and 1 in Belgium in the Benelux region. I'm going to be talking today about the world's first 100% hydrogen fibre clay bricks that we've done this year.
Good afternoon everyone, Cillian Barker from Element Energy. I lead the industrial decarbonization team at Element Energy. We are a low carbon consultancy focused on the energy transition, and a lot of the work that my team does is to think about how can we decarbonize, what are the technologies, policies, strategies for that. We do a lot of work around industrial clusters, and you have seen today the presentation from Chris Robinson looking at the Foresight clusters where we are involved. We are involved in the Hamlet as a cluster plan, but we also do lots of work with the private sector, cement companies, oil and gas companies, iron and steel, helping them understand how they can actually get to net zero and what is the pathway to net zero.
Thank you. So again, the title, Committing to Reaching Net Zero Carbon by 2050. I think that's quite a good one. Some of us are glad it's 2050 and not any sooner. Some of us are thinking, it's just the bare minimum, isn't it? That's what we've all signed up to. And maybe some of us are more optimistic, which is, I think, a mix of everything we've been hearing so far from the morning. So, what are you? I think it's more for Marion and Sarah. Is it 2050? Your sectors are some of the most difficult to decarbonize. Is that what you want to stick with?
You go first. I think we'll probably share the same sentiments as Marianne. It's going to be very, very challenging. Our project can demonstrate that we can make a product that's got 60% less embodied carbon if we can embrace hydrogen across all of our plants, but that's also firing and drying the product as well. Very good point initially made by the lady earlier about efficiencies. I think that's got to be absolutely #1 priority across all of our factories. Then for us, fuel switching, carbon capture and storage, and then only at the very end offsetting. I think it's going to be a challenge, and we're not in the race like everyone else to say that we can get to net zero by 2030 or 2040, because we want to make sure that we can definitely deliver that and we're not greenwashing for our customers. So that's why we're putting our money where our mouth is and actually doing some physical trials, just like Marianne. And we share some of the same EPC contractors and the like with that hydrogen there. So I think we will only say lower than 2050 if we actually believe we can do that.
Fair enough. And I think there's some industries. There's the word carbon neutrality, decarbonization, net zero, and I think for all of us, we've got to select what means the best for us. And for difficult sectors like yourselves, I think the start is always decarbonization and what is it that we can and cannot do. So Sarah, you're talking about how Nickelmash is a brick manufacturing company. You've embarked on, I think, the world's first trial to replace natural gas with hydrogen. Can you give us more of an overview of the trial and talk a bit more about how you think green hydrogen is definitely something for yourselves? We talked a couple of weeks ago, I think now, about comparing the cost of green hydrogen to blue hydrogen if you were closer to a cluster.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. So we initially embarked a couple of years ago looking at the IETF funding, so we've had to go to external funding. We were a small manufacturer compared to some of the big guys in our industry, and we were successful last year with the IFS Phase 1, and we also sit on the consortium with the Pilkington Glass that was also mentioned earlier on in one of the presentations. I think there's a critical path for where we need to get to in order to be able to make sure that we can produce a product from hydrogen like for like than we can with natural gas. It's not as simple. There's a lot more moisture in the kilns. It's very, very complex to get the same firing curve that we need to produce for our clay products to have the same high quality. So it's going to be a challenge for us. We've got a resilience argument behind everything, driving everything. I'm working with some big UK energy producers because we can also be co-located companies throughout the UK where there is the potential that we produce our own hydrogen ourselves from electrolyzers. We've got the land because we have the quarries on our sites where we extract our clay. So we have the potential with the land and the water that we have on our sites. Plus we have multiple sites of ours have wind farms and the like surrounding ours, so it seems feasible to be able to produce green hydrogen on our own sites for our own use, and then we can provide that off-takers for that, whether that be refueling stations or alike. So that's one of the ambitions. Again, it comes down to the critical path of testing first, making sure that that product, which we're getting independently tested as we speak, is as high quality as it possibly can be, and it is actually as sustainable as we hope it to be as well from these trials. So there is a critical path.
And are both of you seeing issues with, you know, engineered aggregates in terms of when you're increasing that recycling rate or whatever, effectively it's not, are you struggling with product quality, and if it's going through QC control and you have to perform tests, is that an issue necessarily, or could you explain?
I would say the gentleman earlier actually brought up a very good point about health and safety, because that has been a very big challenge and it should be a bigger concern for industry to make sure that everything, health and safety has been absolutely paramount to our trials for having hydrogen on our sites, as I'm sure it was for you guys as well. Yeah, we've got to make sure that there's absolutely high quality products and processes happening across the sites when we're trying to embrace this fuel switching.
So again, have you seen any issues
with product quality?
with product quality?
I mean, it's very interesting. A lot of the work we're doing in the Humber has been trying to understand how the Humber cluster can decarbonize, and one of the big emitters in the Humber cluster is actually British Steel, and we actually had a very good conversation with them about, you know, the technologies that they may be going for. And you know, they publish a roadmap that includes CCS, hydrogen, and electrification. But I think, you know, one of the products that they make is steel for rail tracks, and you know, if you change the fuel and you put hydrogen instead of having a blast furnace, then your product quality may change. It may not be suitable for making rail tracks anymore. So it's quite interesting, and you know, I'm sure it's a concern for other industries like glass or, you know, ceramics, where, you know, the moisture in the product would actually affect the performance.
And are you saying that there could be more testing that needs to be done on these products? You know, so I was speaking to someone else in the audience earlier on. You have current testing regimes for your regular products, but we're seeing testing regimes intensifying and more coming, you know, which is typical, isn't it, for regulation?
Yeah, one of the challenges that we've had, well, or have still got in talking about the whole collaboration, is firstly we want to try new fuels. We want to we want to trial innovations and technology, and especially in the cement works, we're regulated by quite heavily, quite rightly, with Part A's, and it's trying to have the relationships with the regulators to allow us to try these things, but in a risk-averse or risk sort of perception, in the sense of it takes sometimes a long time to get sort of amendments to permits or deviations for permits for trials, and sometimes then it just sort of you lose the ability and momentum to do it. And the other thing we've also found is the changes in the standards for the use of alternative materials or new materials. It seems to take an extreme, like enormous amount of time to make some standards, and rightly so. They have to be very careful and have to be do the checks. But I think that's one of the things. I think from a government perspective, is that's one of the things they've got to really embrace as part of their whole NetZero pledge and their ambitions. Is they've got to start to work, I think, differently to what they have done in the past, because I think they can be seen sometimes as a little bit of a barrier to get things done. I don't know your experience with trialing things. So I think that is one of the challenges. Is it's not necessarily the end product. It's actually the you trying to innovate, and what you're trying to innovate with. It's sometimes it's untested technology, and you've always got to have you've always got to be conscious of potential health and safety or quality issues. But sometimes these things you've got to take the risk, otherwise we're never going to innovate and we're never going to change the status quo.
I'm now going to go back a little bit to what you were saying, Marion, earlier about how expensive CCS is. So that economic viability, also when you think about net zero interventions or decarb interventions, it's very important to compare that price to your internal carbon price benchmark or your shadow pricing. It's important that companies have that to be able to see just how much an intervention is going to cost. Then you've also got to ask yourselves, well, how do I even start on internal carbon pricing? Is that just the carbon tax that I'm paying? Is that what I'm paying on the EU ETS scheme? Or is it actually all that I'm going to expend in order to make these interventions, real? And so one of the things we're hoping, I guess, with CCS is right now it's colossal, it's being funded by government, but in time it is going to correct when more and more people sign up to CCS and CCS deployment becomes more commonplace. What do you think about this economic viability? So if there is no government backing, then what's the plans? Because it really looks like for the cement industry, the reliance on carbon capture is the be all and end all. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, if there's no CCS.
No, it's a fair question, and I think the challenge we have is, the example that Paige would, obviously don't quote me on this, but it's about, we're looking at about £450 million to build a carbon capture unit at Page's cement works. So, if you look at the Heidelberg Materials Group, how many cement works they've got around the world, they haven't got that sort of available cash and available funding. So I think there's an element of, it's again working, we've got to work with the government at the moment, because at the moment it wouldn't be economically viable for any organisation. You mentioned you had funding for your hydrogen trial. It's not at the moment. It's not commercially, viable for organisations to do some of these trials. It's the right thing to do, but obviously organisations still need to be making a profit to actually be a business. So I think it's that balance between, you need to innovate, and you need to try these leading examples or exemplar projects. They're going to have to be funded in part by government, in part by private enterprise, but that is always going to have to be the case, I think, with some of this new technology and new innovation. Until you get to the confidence levels that it works, it captures it, and it's right for the industry. But then going back to the hydrogen trial, we found, it works, it's a great, it works, there's no real technical problems, there's no real quality issues from the cement work, but then it's the actual viability of hydrogen at the moment in terms of the fuel and the cost of it. It wouldn't make economic sense for us at the moment to use it. So it's that balance, and I think it will come down over the next. It will eventually come and correct itself.
I think that's what Adam from Progressive Energy was saying in the morning, isn't it? That clients are hydrogen ready, but hydrogen's not quite there yet in the generation.
Yeah.
So catch-22. And I'm going to ask an even more difficult question. So if there isn't CCS, what do we do? What is Plan B? Has that even been thought about?
Well, you saw that unless there's a chemist somewhere in the world looking at how you can make a sort of a cement material that offers the same durability, strength, fire retardant as concrete, it's going to be a real challenge. When you look at concrete, it's the second most used material in the world. At the moment there probably isn't a plan B as such, but I think for us, carbon capture is going to work. It might not, it might take a few sort of reiterations of it, but I think there's evidence from the oil and gas industry and other industries where it is working. I think the challenge is actually how can we actually utilise the actual CO2 we capture to make sure that we're not just burying it, we can actually utilise it and use it in a product or in a process, so it's not a waste.
Definitely. Sylvia, anything to add?
No, not really. I would just kind of say the same thing. We've been doing a roadmap for a cement manufacturer, kind of again trying to come up with a similar waterfall diagram, and it's very difficult. It's almost impossible to decarbonize without CCS. And you could set intermediate targets that you can hit without CCS, but to get to carbon neutral by 2050, it's impossible. And the quality of the product would not be the same if you try to look at substitute materials for cement.
David, I just wanted to, based on what you and your colleague was presenting in terms of this digital technology, can you see clean spend being used for the likes of Hanson and Micromerge?
Yeah, we were looking at the breaking emission emissions in this case, the products we use. I mean, I think in our database, if we had carbon-free or very low carbon cement, then that would be a great way of other construction companies buying that cement. That might then be a premium because you have to pay for carbon capture. But also, we can look at the design of the plant, and I know it's very expensive, but if we're working with another cement manufacturer, and they've got a number of plants, and you can see that if you could roll out a consistent design through those plants, not only could you, what we're looking at is automating the product, but also driving down the cost of that design. So at least we can try and reduce costs, and then looking at the carbon emissions of that product that we're making. Obviously, the target cement in the area that we do work in is engineering. We can try and reduce the CO2 what we're doing.
And yes, go ahead.
I had a question to the cement about the green, about a potential green premium. I think WEF did a paper and they said that a price of the house could be affected by around 3%. So like the relative cost of like what the cost production of cement is if you add a green premium on top versus what it actually is for the end use. I don't know if you have any thoughts on how that would be implemented.
What, in terms of the cost of the cement? So one of the risks that the cement industry has really got, and this is a real risk, is importation from outside of the EU in terms of where the cost of carbon is basically controlled by the EU ETS or UK ETS. And obviously, if we're having imports in with no CBAM, there will be a real challenge where you have that the UK manufacturers of cement are going to have a cost in terms of the carbon cost, and that is fundamentally we always sort of have to go into the cost of sale like any product. So it will fundamentally end into the end user, but it goes back down to that point of where we want to be able to. And one of the things Hanson's got the opportunities because we're an integrated business. We don't just make cement, we also make the concrete within the products. How can we actually design concrete mixes to be as lower cement, sort of embedded cement into the product in terms of mix designs, in terms of sort of chemical admixtures, but also in terms of like efficiencies of the plant with water cement ratios and stuff. So I think it's like anything, it will probably go into the end product, but there is lots and lots of probably reasons and likelihoods that it could go up and also down in the sense of being more efficient as an industry, and also in terms of delivering and supporting the waste from a construction sort of processing plant as well, processing in terms of house building processing things. But it is likely to be added on at some point, unfortunately.
I think the final question I have, and again directed to Marian and Sarah, is what are your counterparts doing? Why is my Vice-Chancellor Michael Marsh so ambitious in these things?
That's a good question. I'd love them to be in the audience so I could answer them myself. But I think it's a challenge where it is driven by a younger population in some ways, and I do find that as we continue to proceed through some of these projects that are classed as globally innovative, that actually it's even more difficult to convince the board to continue with some of these projects that will take a lot of investment down the line, but will mean a product with a much lower carbon footprint. But there is huge demand for it, and I think it will just take the other companies a bit more time to see that. But I think we saw it ourselves within the hour of announcing that we'd done the world first 100% hydrogen trial, and it was 60% less embodied carbon. There was, can we order them? We want to order billions now, like within the hour.
Yeah.
And we said, please read the press release. It's a trial. There's only like a few thousand we're making. But if there is demand there, and that must drive change, positive change, and hopefully we'll get there soon. And hopefully some of the big guys, and Marianne.
Yeah, we've had exactly. I think my commercial director has already sold every single bit of cement from papers from 27. But no, I think for me, we're really lucky that obviously Heidelberg Materials is really leading it in terms of a corporate global sort of initiative, and our CEO, Dr. Van Acton, has stood up at Capital Market Day recently and said, we have got to lead this, we've got to address this, because if we don't do it now, we're not going to be here in 10, 15 years time, we just will not be a business that people want to do business for. So for me, it's really easy. I've got very good support from a very high level corporate entity, and that's what you need. You need CEOs of organisations top down, but also you do need that bottom up support and drive and ambition within the organisation. So for me it's easy answered because it's always been embedded in the culture. You saw we've been doing this since like 1990. Sustainability has been sort of the heart, the values and the heart of the organisation, and we've been trying to drive it. I think it's just become a lot more, in the media spotlight with a lot of the climate crisis and post-COVID and things like that. So, but you're right. You've got to sort of not run before you can walk, and you've got to explain why we're doing things and things like that. But it's great. It's an exciting time for us, and I don't know what my competition are doing. I'm just sort of hopefully not a lot.
But yeah, I think that was very apt. That you need to know what you're dealing with before you commit to a particular target. And I've definitely dealt with clients that have already set, net zero prescribed year ambition, but not even calculated what they're dealing with. Let alone thought about their genuine interventions. Any final questions before we take a break?
Just a very good question on the cement manufacturing side of things. We've heard a lot about being hydrogen ready. How much work has gone into being carbon capture ready? And to frame that, instead of hydrogen, hydrogen's quite an easy thing to deal with. Like it's a switch over to fuel in many respects. Whereas in the context of CCS, you're bringing a whole process on site, which for many industries, they've not really been exposed to dealing with, solvent-based absorption and so on. So how much of that has already been happening in the background leading up to some of these commitments, like in 2027 that you mentioned?
So for us, we've got the Heidelberg Innovation Centre based over in Italy and in Heidelberg Group. So we've got a lot of expertise and specialists in the group that we're now pulling on for the pavement project. So we're quite well advanced in terms of that technology. And when we come to we're just sort of in the process of feasibility of the pavement work. So we've got a lot of experts who are bringing in their learning. We've got the Brevik plant that's, like I said, 18 months ahead of us, so they're sort of already in construction and be hopefully capturing carbon in about 2 years. We've got the Swedish, the Northern Lights projects as well. So for us, personally, from a Hanson perspective, we've got lots and lots of opportunities and learnings and skill sets within the business. So I would say, semi-confidently, we are more ready than probably a lot of other people who are trying to embed carbon capture into the cement industry. But we've probably still got a lot to learn, and like anything, as projects get built, you hope you learn and you follow the same mistakes, or you learn from the mistakes and put them into practice in the next project. So yeah, we're quite fortunate. I think we're quite good and got a lot of experience in that field.
Okay. On that note, we'll take a break for
Thank you.